What's up, everybody? It's Jason Cruz here once again with another episode of The Legal Submission. And we're a little late on this, but I've been doing some things. So I wanted to get back to everyone on the UFC antitrust lawsuit and the proposed settlement provided by the parties. Now, on Friday, July 13th, the parties in the Lee and Kajan Johnson lawsuits met in Judge Boulware's court in Las Vegas to discuss the amended proposed settlement. As you recall, the initial settlement that Judge Boulware had been presented was rejected, essentially, by the judge, stating that he was concerned about the proposed terms of the settlement. Therefore, the parties got back together, amended the settlement, and provided another proposal for Judge Boulware to look over. And at the July 13th hearing, he was still skeptical of the latest proposal. Now, the latest proposal was the $335 million that Zuffa would pay to the aggrieved class in both Lee and Johnson. And the issue was with the Lee allotment as far as how much they would be receiving. Now, in this latest hearing, it looks as though Judge Boulware is concerned with the Johnson class. Now, journalist Josh Gross was at the hearing in person and noted that Judge Boulware did have several areas of concern with the proposal and that he was leaning toward denying the deal and moving to a jury trial. Now, those are harsh words and words of concern for all parties involved. Obviously, that could be a little bit of a saber rattling on the part of Judge Boulware in order to get the parties to conform to a settlement that would be more agreeable with what was proposed and which Judge Boulware had granted cert to. But we shall see what will the parties agree to and continue on forward as far as what if anything they will do to change the terms of the settlement. Now, the proposition of a jury trial would be a monumental shift because there are two issues involved in the lawsuits. The Lee lawsuit covers the time frame from December 16, 2010 to June 30th, 2017, whereas the Johnson lawsuit goes from July 1, 2017 until the present time. Now, the Johnson lawsuit, there are the issues of contracts and the amendments that occurred during the Johnson time frame. Now, Judge Boulware cautioned that the fighters in the Johnson case, the Kajan Johnson lawsuit, might not have an adequate voice in the proceedings. Per Courthouse News, he indicated that athletes are subject to an arbitration clause in their contracts with the UFC that previous athletes were not bound by, and the settlement does not prevent UFC from continuing to use the arbitration clause. Rather, it prevents fighters from challenging the clause or any monopolistic policies. You might recall in our previous discussions on this issue. So, as part of this amended settlement that was proposed on July 13th, there was more money allotted to the Lee plaintiffs than there were Johnson plaintiffs. A little bit of a shift in the settlement money. But also, the issue that appeared to occur for Judge Boulware was the concern over the plaintiffs in the Johnson case because of these contractual provisions. Some had arbitration agreements in them, some did not. And the concern for Judge Boulware is that those plaintiffs in the Johnson class might not be adequately represented in this particular settlement, simply because they will forfeit any rights that they might have had in this settlement once it is agreed and confirmed to by the judge. So The other issue is regarding the contracts, which only last for a duration of 5 years. Even in that case, it might come back that the challenged that Zuffa could challenge the clauses based on an impairment that negatively impacts its business. One of the other things that happened was plaintiff's attorney Eric Kramer alluding to the fact that Dana White and Donald Trump were previous business partners and now friends. You know that White introduced him at the RNC convention. There is an inference that if the case is appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, a right-leaning court would side on behalf of the UFC. Now that's far looking ahead into the future of this particular case, assuming there is no settlement. The issue here is that the latest hearing appears to be the Johnson plaintiffs, as Judge Boulware is saying, control over the that there is concern over the plaintiff's lack of representation in this lawsuit. Zuffa amended its fighter contacts to include class action waivers and arbitration agreements as remedial measures that Judge Boulware must weigh prior to granting the relief. The plaintiffs are in a sticky situation with, while the lead plaintiffs may settle on its own, it cannot be based on Boulware's concerns in Johnson. According to Josh Gross, who reported on this, Judge Boulware found it difficult that plaintiffs in a Johnson lawsuit would only receive $3,000 based on the settlement proposal. The settlement would effectively negate any contractual issues between fighters and the UFC. So that would be it for those fighters that are in the Johnson class. They get $3,000 and they would have no other claims against the UFC. He found it hard to agree on that point, and presently the settlement would mean that if a fighter in the Johnson class would want to reserve its right to sue separately, it would have to forego the $3,000 and hire their own attorney. And if they do so, that would be a long, arduous task. So there is that. Now, I do not see on PACER if there's any other future hearings between the parties. So I'm not sure if Judge Boulware or the parties were asked to go back to the drawing board and come up with a better proposal for settlement, or whether or not they were asked to get dates for a trial, or what will happen next. But that's what's going on right now. So my takeaways from what I'm reading on the latest hearing and the amended settlements is that while Lee may be agreeable to settle, and it looks as though based on the payouts that were provided in the pleadings that a lot of the fighters in that period would be compensated for the alleged antitrust violation. But in the Johnson class, they would not. And in fact, the fact that a lot of money, not a lot, but some money was shifted over to the lead plaintiffs to satisfy that group, there is the issue still with the Johnson plaintiffs. And we will see what happens in the coming month or months, but I assume that something will be decided here in August, maybe early September. This is Jason Cruz for MMA Payouts, a legal submission. We'll keep you up to date on this lawsuit. Thanks.